technology is working, so we are good. So welcome to today. Thank you very much for joining us. As we go through today, if anyone's got any questions, there is a chat function, so feel free to pop any questions in there and I will relay them to speakers at the end. Or given that there's not too many of us, I'm obviously happy for people to unmute at the end when we get to the question and answer session. So a big thank you from us today to Owen Mitchell for organising today. We've had a number of inquiries from members talking about doing business with Ireland post-Brexit, the Southern Ireland. And I think Northern Ireland is a part that gets missed off because there are various protocols in place and trading agreements that are not quite as they've always been. And so we get a number of questions on that. So hence why we are doing today. I will now disappear and be quiet. If anyone has got any questions, as I say, pop them in the chat box. But I will now hand over to Melanie Bancroft from Owen Mitchell. Melanie, over to you.
Lovely. Thanks, James. And yeah, on behalf of Owen Mitchell, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you guys today and to bring in our colleagues from Caldwell and Robinson. So I'm literally just going to give a quick overview, really, about Owen Mitchell. We are a national law firm, but we have a number of international partners. We focus on a number of sectors, with manufacturing being one of them. And I am the business development manager that leads on Owen Mitchell. If you can just move on, James, thank you. And this was just a little bit of a salesy thing, really, but it was just to give you a little bit more information about us, really, and more will come out. So we have a number of people in our manufacturing sector, actually, who have worked in the industry. We're not just lawyers. In fact, our own head of manufacturing was an electrical engineer before becoming a lawyer. So we like to think that we've got some real good insight and based on real experience in the sector that we can talk. And that really helps when we come to talk to our clients about issues that they're facing. Yeah, we're highly efficient in what we do, and we drive efficiencies in a number of ways. So it's not just a one size fits all. It's very much what the client wants and looking for the best solution to that. We have a cost-effective manner, so everything is delivered in the way that's best to suit the client and the matter on hand at the time, such as bank of hours, fixed fees, retainers. It's definitely not an hourly rate job. That is one of the options, but there are many other things that we can do. As I say, we're a national law firm, so we have network of offices all over the country, largely irrelevant, I have to say, in this day and age, thanks to COVID. But there is a friendly face on your doorstep, and we have that spread really around the country. But what it does mean as well, actually, is that we have connections with a number of financial and wealth planning, other kind of bodies that work in the manufacturing industry. And what we pride ourselves on and take great pleasure from is introducing our clients and our contacts to each other and seeing them go off and develop business and do business with each other. And then, yeah, internationally, which leads us on to today. So we're part of a best friend network called First Law International, FLI, and these that Brian, my colleague, has joined us today, who heads up that division. So we work with a number of law firms all over the globe, and what that does is give us, and Brian may well put it a little better than me, but from my point of view, it gives us the opportunity to fit the law firm with the client, so to match personalities and make sure that it's the right law firm for the job, whichever jurisdiction that entails. And we are really enjoying working with many international law firms, and Caldwell Robinson being one of those. And then finally, this is just
Melanie, sorry, can I just chip in there very quickly? So yes, Melanie said I'm head of international at Owen Mitchell. I think for us, clearly we want to be doing English law work in the UK for clients, and that includes overseas clients, but it's imperative for us that we're able to support our UK clients, including our manufacturing clients, with their overseas needs. So I think what Melanie said in relation to the need to have best friend law firms all over the world, and we think we've gone to around 200 countries worldwide where our clients have needed support, is absolutely crucial. Caldwell Robinson are a key relationship for us in Ireland, and many of the the more recent issues around Brexit and Europe. We've involved Emmett and his colleagues there, so we're really pleased to be partnering with Emmett on this call.
Lovely. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. And then just my final point is actually be about a responsible business, and it's something that's very dear to my heart personally, but also that of Irwin Mitchell. And I know many of our clients are challenging us quite rightly over what our practices are in terms of sustainability, CSR, the corporate social agenda. And we are embracing that wholeheartedly here at Irwin Mitchell, and love to work with other like-minded clients, really, not just in the environmental sense, although that is just such huge importance, but constantly looking at different ways to do things that will be better for people, for the environment, and the communities that we work in. So without further ado, I will hand over to Emmett and Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Firstly, I'd like to echo what Brian said, and to thank Irwin Mitchell for the opportunity to present to you today. The relationship with Irwin Mitchell is a very important one for us at Caldwell Robinson, and it's a great pleasure to be speaking to you. I'm a partner in Caldwell Robinson, and I've focused a lot on some of the Brexit issues that have arisen for businesses in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. As a lawyer, I practice in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and we have offices in Derry and in Dublin. So I think we're well placed to talk to you about some of the issues that might arise today. My colleague who's with me today is Stephen Kelly, who is the Chief Executive of Manufacturing Northern Ireland. And I don't think there's anybody really who's been more enmeshed in some of the Brexit issues that have arisen. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to hear from him today, and I'll pass on to Stephen shortly. So I'm going to present just a number of slides speaking to two issues primarily. One is the new relationship, or the new trading relationship, which exists as a result of the Northern Ireland Protocol in terms of GB and NI business trade, and also to talk briefly about some of the issues that I think are going to be relevant for you in the lessons that you might want to learn, and also in some of the advice and assistance that you might want to seek from colleagues like Irwin Mitchell around some of the issues which inevitably will arise in due course. So James, if you could perhaps move the slides on. And next slide, please. So in talking about the Northern Ireland Protocol, the protocol governs the trade of goods, manufactured goods, not services, into Northern Ireland from Great Britain. It operates independently of the current trade and cooperation agreement, which is the overall framework agreement agreed between the European Union and the United Kingdom. And also the protocol rules in terms of the specific issues are governed by a new joint EU and UK committee, in which Mr. Sefcovic is the EU representative, and whom Stephen will tell you a little bit about his recent visit, and Stephen met with them this week. So the rules around the protocol operate independently of the TCA, and it was always in contemplation of the parties when signing up to it that those rules would evolve, that there would need to be a shift and change in relation to business needs, business expectations, etc. And what we've seen thus far is perhaps not all that surprising in terms of the evolution and development of those rules, particularly around things like grace periods being extended, etc. James, can you move the slides on? So the Northern Ireland Protocol effectively means that Northern Ireland goods can freely circulate in the EU single market, which then remain subject to single market and VAT rules, EU VAT rules. So Northern Ireland goods enjoy unfettered access also to the UK's internal market, that is goods from Northern Ireland going to Great Britain. And Northern Ireland remains technically part of the United Kingdom's customs territory, and therefore in due course Northern Ireland will benefit from free trade agreements entered into by the UK, notwithstanding the existence of the protocol. And so what has been referred to as the REC border is effectively the import controls that are now being placed on goods passing from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. Can move the slides on, James? And this has sometimes been referred to as two open doors from the perspective of Northern Ireland goods and the position of Northern Ireland within its two primary markets in the EU and GB. So Northern Ireland made goods can be sold into the European Union and to Great Britain with no tariffs, no quotas, no rules of origin barriers, and no customs declarations or processes. Northern Ireland goods can still use the CE mark, which we've obviously been used to using pre-Brexit. And if there is a UK body used to carry out any conformity assessments, they need to have the UK NI mark plus the CE mark for goods in Northern Ireland. It's worth flagging that the new UK CA marking, which again, its implementation has been phased back somewhat, cannot be used for goods that are placed on the Northern Ireland market. So Northern Ireland still has a differing, or will have a differing conformity assessment marking in due course. James, can we move the slides on? So there's an unfettered market for Northern Ireland goods, qualifying goods. There's no export declarations in respect of those, no exit summary declarations, no import declarations on arrival into Great Britain from Northern Ireland, no customs duties to pay, no VAT to pay at the point of arrival, and no changes on how goods from Northern Ireland arrive at ports in Great Britain. There are some exceptions to that, but they are very limited in scope and nature and applicable to very specific goods. But effectively, Northern Ireland businesses can trade with GB in terms of goods going from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, generally as they previously have done in the past. Can we move the slides on, James? For goods moving between Northern Ireland and the European Union, there are no checks or processes, no customs duties or tariffs, no customs border between Northern Ireland and the EU. Goods can travel and circulate freely. No need to register for VAT in each member state, which I know it may be something that's dealt with later on in the presentations. And Northern Ireland, as a consequence of all of this, maintains its regulatory alignment on goods with the EU and can continue, as I say, to use the CE mark. Can we move the slide on, James, please? It's perhaps worthwhile contrasting the position between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland in this context. So for a GB-based business considering a footprint in the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland in order to sell into the EU market, well, why is that an issue if the Trade and Cooperation Agreement removes most tariff and quota issues? Well, the reality is, I'm sure you're all aware, is that non-tariff issues remain in terms of rules of origin, conformity assessments, import and export declarations, labelling VAT issues, etc. And I suppose one of the points that I'll come to very shortly, but one of the issues that our Republic of Ireland-based clients have experienced is that they have had to grapple with these issues whenever effectively the EU put up an import border or a regulatory and customs import border on goods coming from GB into the Republic of Ireland. So whilst there are no tariff and quota issues generally, the issue of rules of origin, assessments, etc., conformity assessments are things that our ROI businesses have had to grapple with. The reason that perhaps some companies are considering Northern Ireland instead of the Republic of Ireland is that GB companies can still use, in certain circumstances, their UK group tax umbrella for Northern Ireland subsidiaries, whereas we're finding that in order to establish a business in the Republic of Ireland or a subsidiary in the Republic of Ireland, there are significant Irish revenue approval issues that need to be gone through. So it's not impossible, and it's certainly by no means an effort to dissuade in that regard. But there are some issues that need to be taken into account in terms of where you would relocate a subsidiary if you were wanting to try and sell into the EU market. James, can we move on the slides? So, all that being said, what lessons can I proffer to you today on behalf of some of the clients that I've been talking to, particularly our Republic of Ireland based clients? So as I say, for the Republic of Ireland businesses, Brexit has had an import and export issue due to the EU implementing its full suite of import and export controls. That is not an issue primarily that British GB-based import businesses have experienced yet, because the full suite of import controls on the part of the UK government for GB businesses hasn't come in yet, and in fact may well be phased out to a further grace period. So in Northern Ireland, Brexit has largely been an import issue for businesses vis-a-vis trade with Great Britain, goods coming into Northern Ireland raising in import issues. As I say, the UK government has delayed implementing the full extent of its own import controls, and therefore in the Republic of Ireland, there has been an issue with both import and export issues. And one of the issues that arises, and I think Stephen will go into this in better detail than I, but is that in terms of the functioning of your business, really your preparedness and readiness for what's going to come whenever the full suite of Brexit controls are implemented by the UK government, is that you're only really as good as the weakest link in your supply chain. And these are issues that you really do need to be looking at now. Can we move the slides on, James? So the simple question I ask any GB-based business, or indeed any business contemplating import and export trade, is imagine that UK import controls were coming in next week rather than further down the line. Are you ready for that? And if not, what do you need to do? I think the message that's come across from many people, including people like Stephen, are that you shouldn't be waiting. Audit your supply chains and your processes, your contracts, address potential issues in your supply chain before the import controls come in, not after, so that you're not left with goods stranded or fees to pay you weren't contemplating. And it's worth noting that recent surveys of Northern Ireland businesses show that one of the main difficulties that resulted from Brexit, so that is businesses in which imports were coming from Great Britain essentially was the issue, is the lack of understanding and preparation on the part of their GB-based colleagues about what that meant, the new customs and regulatory issues meant for the supply chain. Either their partners and customers weren't ready for it, didn't understand it, hadn't gone through the audit process that we talked about, and that had huge knock-on effects for the businesses in Northern Ireland. And so you can see how that could easily flip the other way in circumstances where the UK government raises its full suite of import controls, and you find that your importers in the EU are perhaps not as conversant as they should be or could be with some of the difficulties and issues that they and you are going to face whenever those export or those import controls are raised. And those are things like import and export declarations, relevant conformity assessments, proper rules of origin evidence, if required, or at least the ability to evidence it subsequently, VAT issues, labelling, where that's an issue. And then one of the other issues that is perhaps not a legal issue as such, or is the haulage and freight capacity issues, which have been a huge and significant factor in terms of one disruption at one end of the haulage supply chain leads to lorries and freight stranded and knock-on delays, etc. Can we move the slides on, James? So some of the practical considerations that I know Stephen will be able to speak to much more with greater clarity than I are, the need for an EORI number. Can you avail of or utilize the simplified declaration procedures? Are you able to establish or obtain authorized economic operator status, which will make navigating some of these issues easier? Thinking about who will make customs declarations, both import and export, and who's going to transport the goods. Is it you, a customs agent, or a transporter, the importer? Can the exporter export the goods, and what do they need from you in order to be able to do that? Are there any new licensing requirements? Check the commodity codes for your goods and look at rules of origin requirements and whether or not your supply chain is going to create issues regarding rules of origin further down the line that you need to work through. work out the value of your goods, so you can actually complete these forms whenever you're asked to complete them, or someone's completing them on your behalf and they need this information. Find out if you can delay or reduce any duty payments, which are going to be things which it's going to be a factor which may be very beneficial in maintaining cash flow. Again, do you need licenses or certificates for your goods that you didn't need previously? Check the labeling, marking and marketing rules. Consider VAT issues, and of course, keep invoices and records, because particularly around things like rules of origin, you may be asked to satisfy the relevant tax authority as to the origin of goods subsequently. So it's important to keep records. James, can we move the slides on? So you cannot assume that your EU supplier is aware of what import controls the UK government's going to implement. That was one of the main lessons that came out of the Northern Ireland process, was that, you know, colleagues in England weren't necessarily, or in Scotland, etc., weren't necessarily aware of what businesses in Northern Ireland were going to have to complete or fill in or deal with in terms of the import rules. Speak to your suppliers and help them understand the new rules at your end. Review your contracts in light of the import control. Do these need to be revised? And you can contact colleagues like Irwin Mitchell to assist you with that sort of thing. And consider implications for freight and haulage partners, and seek again to address these issues early. Next slide, James. So those are a brief run through of how the Northern Ireland Protocol operates, and also some of the issues that we have found have arisen for our Northern Ireland and ROI-based clients. I'm going to hand over to Stephen Kelly now. As I say, Stephen's the Chief Executive of Manufacturing NI. He's fresh from a meeting with Mr. Sefcovic and his colleagues last week. Stephen has been dealing with Brexit issues and some of the issues I've talked about since long before the implementation of the new Brexit regime for Northern Ireland. And I'm going to hand over to Stephen, and hopefully he can make a few points. And I know that both myself and Stephen will make ourselves available for questions after the presentation. So Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Emmett, and thanks to our hosts for inviting us along here today. As Emmett says, I'm Chief Executive of an organisation called Manufacturing Northern Ireland. UK colleagues will be familiar with MACH UK. We're pretty similar to them in that we represent everybody who makes anything from aeroplane wings to chicken wings and everything in between. So it's the broadest sense of what manufacturing is. As Emmett said, we've been engaged in the Brexit process right back to actually prior to the EU referendum back in 2016. And we've been actively engaged directly with government in Belfast and in Dublin, but particularly in Westminster, and indeed directly engaged with the European Union since 2017 on the particular issues that Brexit would cause to the island of Ireland and Northern Ireland in particular. Those engagements resulted in an acceptance of both sides, both the UK and the EU, that a unique relationship was and a unique solution was required for the island of Ireland in order to avoid a hard physical infrastructure on that 500-kilometre border that runs right through Ireland. And where we've arrived at is a solution which is in many respects suboptimal, but in other respects is hugely beneficial to manufacturers or anybody who trades in goods here in Northern Ireland. What we've encountered since the 1st of January, because we had no time to prepare for any of this stuff, was quite significant disruption in terms of supply chains. That disruption was largely on the routing from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, but it also was disruption from the European Union into Northern Ireland. And this is an important message, I suppose, for those that are on this meeting this morning or watching later on. Do not assume that your supply chain understands their requirements when it comes to actually moving goods to your business, whether that's based in Belfast or Bradford or anywhere else. What we discovered was that the import controls for a manufacturing business, because it has a direct impact upon your supply chain and then also a direct impact on your calculations around rules of origin. The import controls are much more difficult to manage as a business than any potential export controls. So as Emmett rightly said in his presentation, we have two doors open to us. We can trade unfettered with the rest of the United Kingdom, and our goods can freely circulate with the European Union. So in terms of an outbound border, we don't have any of those at all, and we're benefiting greatly from that. However, the controls from Great Britain into Northern Ireland is where the real pain points begin to establish themselves. What we have found is that many of our businesses have had to do a crash course in customs administration, had to do a crash course in commodity codes, had to do a crash course in rules of origin, had to do a crash course in just being able to continue to move goods across borders in order to continue to try to make our supply chains operate for us. The good news for UK or GB businesses is that earlier today, the UK government announced a further relaxation or a further delay in terms of its implementation of its border operating model. So that inbound border into Britain will not come into existence on the 1st of October for veterinary checks and on the 1st of January for some of those other customs requirements, and instead will be delayed longer. Now, why have they done that? They've done that because UK business is not ready for those import controls. All the evidence shows that exporters have had a pretty difficult time getting goods from Britain into European markets. But when they survey businesses, when they talk to representative groups such as Make UK and others, it's quite clear that UK businesses, Great Britain-based businesses, have not got to grips with what the import controls will be once those are introduced. There's a fear in government that Christmas could be cancelled if those controls were put in place, so they've avoided that cliff edge in the immediate term. But this is an opportunity for those people on the call to use the time wisely, to actually look at their supply chains, to look at the rules of origin, to look at how they're established, to ensure that those disruptions that are witnessed in supply chains do not expand into your imports that you may be bringing in from the EU or other parts of the world. If I gave an example of how a business here in Northern Ireland managed this process for themselves, they brought on board some consulting through legal advice, customs and taxation advice, and they went through their entire supply chain in advance of the 1st of January of this year. They worked out what that supply chain was, what the products were, where it came from, what the origin down the food chain in terms of those products were, to ensure that it had a good sight of that supply chain and a good understanding of what those products were, what their components were made up of, and how they actually got to Northern Ireland. And what that business was able to do, because it had a proper analysis of its supply chain, was it actually worked out which parts of its supply chain it needed to change, and to change early. So finding alternative suppliers in other territories, talking to the supply chain to ensure that there was sufficient processing done at their supplier side from other third country products that may have been inputs into that supply chain, to ensure that the rules of origin would be met. And in some cases, they looked at each of the commodity codes, and it could run into thousands of different items, what the tariff potential was on those individual commodity codes. And in some cases, they chose to just pay the tariff. But in other cases, they needed to change, they recognized that they needed to change their supply chain. So for the big message from today, from me, from our experience, would be take the opportunity that's been presented to you, take the additional time that's now being presented to you today, and use it very wisely. Bring in the expertise that's required, whether that's legal, customs, accounting, financial, or otherwise, and actually use the opportunity that's been presented to you to ensure that whenever these import controls begin to arrive, whenever Brexit becomes fully visible to our manufacturing community in the UK, that it is at least prepared as best it possibly can for that moment to arrive. I mentioned about the opportunity that's been presented to Northern Ireland with this, and we've already seen that opportunity being played out in terms of our trade. So if we just take the numbers that are available from the Irish Central Statistics Agency, What it shows is that sales of Northern Irish goods to customers in the Republic of Ireland have grown by 77% since the 1st of January of this year. Why is that the case? Because Ireland has a full third country import border with the rest of the UK. So goods travelling from Wales across to Ireland need to go through a full import border at Dublin Port. There isn't sufficient scope within the Trade and Cooperation Agreement that the UK has agreed with the EU to remove some of those frictions and some of those non-tariff barriers. And indeed, on many occasions, the tariff still needs to be applied whenever those goods arrive into Ireland. So what Irish customers have done is they've looked north rather than looking east. They've looked to potential suppliers in Northern Ireland and bought their products or commodities or components from Northern Ireland businesses. So we have benefited enormously in the first 6 months to the tune of 77%. Even if you take out a COVID element from that, we've 50% more sales to Ireland from Northern Ireland in the first 6 months of this year. And that's a recognition from business, from supply, from customers, that their supply chain is critical, and to remove friction as best possible from that supply chain is more important to them than anything else. Trade in many respects is like water. It will find the quickest, easiest route through. It'll avoid the rocks and the waterfalls. And in Irish businesses' case, they've chosen to move their supply chain to Northern Ireland and away from Britain. And that's going to become even more of a problem for UK businesses once that import control comes in. Where we are right now, because there's some commentary around the Northern Ireland Protocol and its effectiveness and the view of the UK government that it wishes to renegotiate some elements of it. As Emmett said, we met with Vice President Maroš Šefčovič, who's the EU's chief negotiator on behalf in relation to the UK's relationship with the EU, including the Northern Ireland Protocol. The EU is in a position to try to provide more simplification, more affordability in terms of moving goods from Britain into Northern Ireland. They want to ensure that those supply chains that are by necessity still coming from the island of Britain to Northern Ireland can continue to trade in areas like, for instance, pharmaceuticals and medicines, veterinary medicines, chilled goods such as sausages, etc., etc., etc. They recognise that there's a requirement to look at the protocol, which on paper is fine, but in practice has some significant challenges for business, and to make that as simple as possible for businesses here. What they're not in the business of doing is actually creating an opportunity for the UK as a whole to take what it agrees for Northern Ireland and operate that across the entire United Kingdom. What they're in the business of doing right now is actually providing additional benefit for Northern Ireland businesses rather than actually making the relationship between the whole of the UK and the EU better. Some elements of that will be, from a legal point of view, the EU has refused the UK's permission to join the Lugano Convention, for instance, which would help manage cross-border disputes. But they're looking at providing that opportunity for businesses in Northern Ireland. What they're looking at is actually going through their at-risk register and actually going, what are the things that actually require a full frontier customs declaration when it arrives in Northern Ireland from Britain, and removing a lot of those responsibilities from a customs perspective for GB customers sending stuff to Northern Ireland. They're also looking at EU content and EU origin goods, retaining its economic identity throughout its entire journey, even if it actually transfers through Britain. They're looking at reducing potentially some of the burden in terms of rules of origin for third country goods that have a significant EU content that will make those rules of origin easier should stuff arrive from Britain into Northern Ireland. But what they're not looking at is making life easier for businesses in England, Scotland and Wales. They're only looking at making life easier for businesses in Northern Ireland and households in Northern Ireland. So what I would say to you all is that do not miss this opportunity that you've been presented with. The single biggest challenge with Brexit isn't exports, it's imports. That has been delayed further today. Take the opportunity to talk to Emmett and colleagues in Erwin Mitchell or other advisors you may have, and go through your business with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that whenever these controls come into play, you're in a position to be able to manage that process. Thanks, Emmett.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we'll hand back over to our colleagues at Erwin Mitchell.
Thank you, everyone. My name's Sarah Cardew. I'm a tax partner at Erwin Mitchell. I deal with businesses both in the UK and in Ireland and internationally, advising them on corporate tax and property tax issues. And my team are here to help all over the UK. So I was asked to give just a practical overview of some of the tax points to watch on trade with Northern Ireland post-Brexit, which some of the points have been very ably covered earlier in the seminar. And actually, I'd reiterate the point that's just been made, to really go through your businesses with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that all your processes and procedures are ready. And that you familiarise yourselves with all the requirements that have to be met. As was also said earlier, a lot of businesses have had to do a crash course on customs controls that they wouldn't have had to do before. So I hope this quick overview will help you with that. So as was mentioned, one of the most important things I think as a business to think about from a UK and Northern Irish trade perspective are the rules of origin for your goods. And so as a Northern Irish exporter to the UK, what should you know about the rules of origin for goods? Well, as we all know, the UK is not part of the EU anymore. And so we're now trading based on a free trade agreement. So to benefit from this free trade agreement, goods have to be of a UK or EU origin, and they have to meet the rules of origin. Now, as was mentioned earlier, there are thousands and thousands of rules of origin codes, commodity codes, and the rules determine the origin of the goods based on where the products or materials used in their production come from. So goods that don't meet these rules of origin rules can still be traded, but they're not able to benefit from the preference under the trade agreement, and may have to pay standard tariffs that the EU and the UK apply to imports. So the special tariffs are for what they call their most favoured nations, and so you may have to pay standard tariffs. So it's very important to work out what the commodity code is for your particular goods, and to know where they've been manufactured from and where the products used in them have been processed. Now, if we're looking at the import and export of goods into the UK, now that the UK is not a member state of the EU, Northern Ireland remains subject to the EU VAT rules in relation to the supply of goods. So when your business is looking at VAT, you've really got to consider three regimes if you're looking at importing and exporting with the UK. You've got to look at the rules for the supply of goods between the UK and the EU. You've got to look at the supply of goods between Northern Ireland and either the EU or the UK, or the supply of goods and services, supply of services between the UK and the EU. So if you're a business looking to import, export with the UK, the key points to consider are what is the VAT position on the import of your goods from Northern Ireland to the United Kingdom, and what is the exports on those. Import VAT is not generally due on consignments of goods that originate from outside the UK, if those consignments are £135 or less. But of course, your imports are going to far exceed that. The extension of import VAT to all goods arriving from the EU can raise a potential cash flow issue. And it's possibly, it can be different from imports arriving from outside the EU. So I think, again, look at your business with a fine tooth comb, look at what you have to pay and when to pay it, and ensure that you have the right cash flow controls in place. And finally, I would mention the EORI number that was mentioned earlier. So the EORI numbers, are they still the same, and where do we use it, is a question that I'm often asked. So yes, businesses moving goods between the UK and the EU, so that would include Northern Ireland, require what's called an Economic Operator Registration Identification Number, otherwise known as an EORI number, from both the UK and the EU. Now, these are EORI numbers are unique numbers that businesses use to identify themselves to customs authorities in their customs declarations and their import and export documentation. And without a valid GB or EU EORI number, goods will not clear customs. And for Northern Ireland, there's a separate process for that. So it's very important to make sure that you have your EORI numbers set up in good time. So if you're a business who's importing into the UK, you will need a GB prefixed EORI number. And HMRC, our revenue authority, issued them in 2019 to all businesses it believed would need them. And the GB EORI number is made up of the GB prefix, your VAT number, and there's usually 000 after that. So crucially, a UK business needs an EU EORI number to import or export from the EU 27 member states. You can obtain a single number for the whole of the EU, and that may be potentially available if you're exporting to a particular EU member state. So any UK or non-EU business is no longer entitled to act as the exporter of record for goods leaving the EU. They have to appoint a representative. And this is another practical point. Do look at the procedures and whether your business needs to appoint a customs representative and get that in place in good time. I'm often asked, have the rules changed for VAT for supplies? So for supplies of services, for example. So from the date the UK left the EU on the 1st of January 2021, the VAT rules applying for supplying services between the UK and the EU are exactly the same as those for supplying services from the UK to outside the EU. So if you're a business in the UK and the place of your service is in an EU country, you don't have to pay UK VAT as before. But it's worth noting that for some supplies, you may have to register and account for VAT in the country you're supplying services to, and therefore that can have practical implications as well. So, as I think was mentioned earlier, the UK are looking to renegotiate certain aspects of this EU trade agreement, and it may be some of the aspects to what we're saying about VAT and EORI numbers and VAT representatives, etc., will change. So it's a question of watch this space. But if you need any advice at all on what you or your business need to do for VAT and customs duties, please do get in touch with colleagues at both our firms. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over to the next speaker.
Many thanks, Sarah, for that, and to Emmett and Stephen. Really insightful, and so much. I was scribbling away so much information to digest, really, and with the changes, as you say, Stephen, for today. So, James, we'll hand over to you now for the Q&A.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Yeah, again, thank you to all our speakers. That was really interesting and a lot of information there. One of the things that has come through is obviously there's quite a lot in the news at the moment about Northern Ireland, both in terms of protocol and sort of post-Brexit. You've obviously given us an overview of where we are now, but do we know sort of what's likely to happen next and be the next stages?
Maybe I'll take that one, Emmett.
Yeah, Stephen, I think that's more your area than mine.
No problem. So yeah, there is some commentary around the operation of the protocol. The UK back in July published a command paper setting out its view on about how the protocol should be operated. It actually basically requested a renegotiation of some elements of it. However, potential renegotiation has been utterly rejected by the EU side. Apart from anything else, the practicalities of that, they don't have a legal authority from their parliament to renegotiate. And secondly, all those people who were involved in the negotiation have moved on back to their day jobs. And in fact, Michel Barnier himself is standing to be president of France. So the people aren't available and they have no mandate. But what's often missed is actually the UK is not talking about scrapping the protocol completely. It's just talking about trying to make it work a bit better. And that's the space that the EU have now found themselves in. So in our conversations with Vice President Šefčovič last Thursday and with his team, they're really interested in the practicalities, the problems, but also the solutions. So they've challenged us as a business community in Northern Ireland to come back to them before the end of this week with a long list of what any issues have been identified and whatever potential solutions that we've identified, either from a business operational point of view or stuff that's based in EU law, etc., etc., etc. And the good thing about business is every morning a business wakes up and it tries to find that, it exerts all energy to find that one way to make things better, rather than sometimes our political friends exert all energies to find 100 ways to make things worse. So we're in, culturally, we're in the right place. Culturally, we know we can contribute and the EU is open to that, which is good. So there's a lot of conversation, but actually nothing significantly will change. There will be tinkering. As our Prime Minister has said, the barnacles will be sanded from the bottom of the boat, whatever that means. But we'll ensure that the protocol works better rather than actually being scrapped completely. And why is that the case? Because what happens in Northern Ireland has a massive impact in terms of the future relationship between the UK and the EU. The Trade and Cooperation Agreement was only agreed on about 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve. That is just getting time to bed in. If they don't get the Northern Ireland piece right, then that requires a full renegotiation as well. So neither side wish to engage in that. Both sides wish to move on. But in order to move on, they're trying to make the Northern Ireland Protocol better rather than removing it completely.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. I don't know if anyone's got anything else to add on to that. That pretty much covers where we're at on that one. I just want to take the opportunity to invite anyone else that's on the call, if you either want to use, there's a raise hand function, or if you want to unmute yourself to speak, feel free to do so now if you've got any questions. I'll just have a look in the chat and see if any have popped up there. Not that I can see. So as I say, I think there's quite a lot of information there. And I know that if people have got questions, they are able to either drop them back to myself here at the MTA, and I will forward those on. Or again, if you want to contact any of our speakers, then you can do so through the details that are on the screen.
James, can I add one final point?
Sure, please do. Yes, yeah.
So where lots of things fall down is in the region of rules of origin, and particularly the test around what is or is not sufficient processing. So lots of UK firms will bring in components from China, from India, from Korea, from Mexico, United States, or wherever else, and they may add that into part of their manufacturing process. But unless you're able to demonstrate that there's been sufficient processing done to those components, ingredients, raw materials, that final product that you produce will not have preference under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. So you could still end up your product either being turned away or a huge tariff applied to it. So it's a very complex area of business. It's a complex area of law, for that matter, as well. But if firms just really understood what the origin rules are around the Trade and Cooperation Agreement that the UK struck with the EU, that will bring them, I think, much more clarity around what they need to do in terms of the actions over the coming months ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really good point and key to remember. Are there any other final thoughts from any of our speakers before I bring this meeting to a close? No, I think all that remains for me to say then is a massive thank you to our 4 speakers this morning for joining us. Big thank you again to Owen Mitchell for pulling this event together. And like I say, whether you're watching this live or on the recording and you've got any questions, if you want to forward those through, then we can make sure they get to the right person. So I will wish you a very good day for the rest of the day. I will now stop the recording and thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, James, Melanie, and others.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.